I'm gonna go ahead and kick things off, and if anybody joins and misses the background, they can always listen to one of the previous ones. Appreciate you guys being on the call. We've been doing this now for a year and a half. These calls, it started off with a lot of one-on-one calls, but then the interest in the brand got to the point where I'd have to do these weekly calls, and they candidly were actually better because we got really good Q&A out of it. And so in the beginning, I would do this like 30-minute speech on how we created the brand and all that, and maybe 15 minutes of Q&A, but now it's more like 15 minutes of background, and then let Q&A roll as long as I'm available, because that's the best way for everybody on the call to get benefits out of it. And then we started recording them and posting them on our YouTube channel for people, and it's allowed me to kind of review things and see how things have evolved over time too, to make for holistically a better program. So appreciate you guys being on the call. Just a little bit about me. I grew up in Portland, Maine. I played baseball in Maryland in college, and that's how I ended up in Maryland in the Mid-Atlantic. I met my wife in college, and that's typically how you get anchored somewhere. And so I'm based out of right outside of Gettysburg, and it's the closest to Maine as you can really get in the Mid-Atlantic is this Gettysburg area. Nice. This is around this time of year, things get really nice fall foliage at the Gettysburg battlefields. And I like it a lot, although I do miss Maine quite a bit. I started off in finance and worked in retail at TD Bank, brokerage at TD Ameritrade, and then moved to asset management with Merrill Lynch, and then lastly T. Rowe Price before jumping into the oil change business. And so I was largely I've always been entrepreneurial, and I've always wanted to have a business to build and a brand to build. And I thought that if I had bought a business, I could kind of scratch that entrepreneurial itch while kind of maintaining this career in finance. I was pretty invested in it. I had several securities licenses between the 67, 66, and 63, and some of the insurance licenses to be able to work with variable annuities and individual 401ks and small business retirement plans like SEP, Simples, and Keos. And so I didn't anticipate my life going this direction, but I think when you figure out what your DNA kind of pulls you towards, that's when you find a lot of happiness and a lot more fulfillment. I was not meant to be behind a desk. And so while I was at T. Rowe Price, I would always just scan biz by sell for businesses that I felt were manager centric, but not skilled manager centric. Excuse me. And so I looked at a lot of businesses that I thought, like, okay, how does the business run when the manager has his time off? Does it require the owner to go in to do it? And so if you watch any of the previous calls, I always use a pizzeria as an example where, if you don't know how to make pizza and your head pizza maker goes down, then, who's going to make the pizza? You got to either close down or, take a shot at it yourself. And so with the oil change business, the manager typically has 2 days off. And so on one of those days, your full-time employees run the business. And for me, I thought, okay, well, if there's continuity of the business, then it's something that I can run from afar while maintaining my career in finance at T. Rowe Price, because it was a really good job, and it was a well-paying job, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. And so I took over this Quick Lube in Harrisburg. I had my own ideas of what I thought the industry should be doing. And I spent a lot of time at my desk reading Yelp reviews. Back then, Yelp was still relevant. And so I just reverse engineered kind of what I thought the customers were complaining about the most and what they wanted. And it's really in line with the movement of startups. Actually, I feel like the quick lube space was kind of before its time, because every big startup that's happening today revolves around reducing friction between the consumer and the product or service. And so at the end of the day, we're selling people their time back. We're not using oil changes as a loss leader like, Meineke, Monroe, and those full service repair shops use oil changes as a loss leader. It's our main, 90% of our revenue. And so we need to make money on it. Well, we charge a premium because we're selling people their time back. And once we successfully started relaying that message and getting that message across. That's when that first location in Harrisburg really started to take off. And so we doubled down to open a second location in Dillsburg, Pennsylvania, which is a town of 6,000 people, 20 minutes outside of Harrisburg. And basically, it validated the model. And then the third location we opened was in Mount Prospect, Illinois, which was 800 miles away from where I lived. So it really validated the model in the sense that, I physically could not be there, even if on the drop of a hat, if something happened, you can always get a flight as quickly as possible, but it's not the same as being able to drive there within a couple hours. And so very early on in the DNA of this business was woven these third-party resources, third-party applications, procedures for doing things, and creating a model where you don't need people on site in order to have oversight of that business, and the manager really does the day-to-day for you. So as we scaled up, I had my own ideas of where the industry was going. I felt as though Jiffy Lube was kind of moving away from the oil change space with their multi-care play, and I thought that there was an opportunity for someone to step in and kind of be the Chick-fil-A to McDonald's, So it's funny, we're not having a discovery day this month, but we have discovery day every month. And I don't want to give too much away, but we do this exercise with everyone in the room where we talk about top of mind brand awareness. And we say, when I say fast food, who do you think of? And very early on in this process, maybe 9 out of 10 people would say McDonald's, but very recently it's been 50-50 McDonald's and Chick-fil-A. And I think what that shows is if you create a model, one, that resonates, and two, is very consumer centric, you can penetrate that top of mind brand awareness. And I think we have an opportunity to do that if we execute on scaling fast. And that's where franchising came in. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to corporately open 300 locations in a timely fashion to be able to get that scale to take over that spot, especially as electric vehicles start to penetrate the market in a more meaningful way. And so franchising really does give you that opportunity to open more locations, without having to outlay capital, your own capital, as much. And so we teamed up with Frandevco because a lot of the people on their team worked within Driven Brands, which is the portfolio of Meineke, Meineke and Mako and Amco and a lot of automotive brands. And there are people on our team that have seen through bringing a brand from being a regional brand to a national brand. And so that was important to me. And we've been able to sell a lot of locations because I think the model resonates, because we are focused on the low overhead and the oil change only experience, which we believe is what the consumer wants. We remain a very consumer driven business, but we also want to be an operator friendly business, because there's not many franchises in our space that are operator friendly. They're mostly driven towards, private equity and family offices. And so we wanted to create a model that allowed for a lower cost of entry. And I think we've executed on that. And so now we're just going through the process of dealing with the commercial real estate landscape and getting these stores open. And we're getting permits issued, and we're trying to deal with contractors who are backed up because of labor problems. And I think, as is everything we've done to this point, we've executed to the best of our abilities and shown that, we're able to do a lot with very little. And that's kind of the ethos of this brand. And it's been a lot of fun. So I'm not going to talk anymore about myself. I tried to drag that out a little bit longer than normal, Michael, because I thought there would be more people on this call, but we can go right into Q&A, and you guys can go back and forth as long as little as you want with questions about anything to do with the business.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of in the beginning stages here of, learning, what your guys' process are, what your brand is. A lot about it. I've been going back and forth with Michael a handful of times. So, and I may be, this may be, the wrong platform for this, but as a franchisee who's interested in getting into it, when I was looking over the FDD, are you guys, when, we're looking at, a franchise location, is it am I buying basically as part of my franchise agreement, getting the rights to a 3 or 4 mile square area, or am I purchasing, or am I getting the franchisee rights to a particular city or, large, area?
You want me to answer that, Costa?
Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah. Anthony, I apologize. It wasn't more clear, and we haven't done the territory call yet, but this is a good format to bring it up. So, one of the things that we looked at Costa spent quite a bit of money on this platform, GeoStrategies. They do a lot of work for the financial industry in the East Coast. And, we looked at where our current locations are, what type of population supports them. And a lot are actually a lot less. They're in tertiary markets than we've provided the franchisees. For example, we've got, and we found that the majority of customers, about 80-85%, come from within 3 to 3.5 miles of each location.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did is that's sort of the basis where we started. And then we said, look, what does a very productive area look like? So you take Harrisburg, for example. It's the first location that Costa purchased and started up, and that's got about 46,000 within 3 miles. So we sort of settled on a population of 50,000 or a minimum of 3 miles. And so at the end of the day, we're not going to be putting locations any closer than about 3 miles, even if you have, higher population count. So what that does is we'll go through, we've divided the country up with these circles, and it's measured in radii. And we generally in the metro areas will have a 3, 4, or 5 mile circle. There are also other layers that we have available to us. If, for example, you want to move to the outskirts of a particular city, maybe to a smaller town, I've got a quadrant-based layer, which actually tells us in a specific quadrant how many people you would have around this particular area. So, for example, in a tertiary market, if we're trying to find 50,000, we know it can work. It's done extremely well in places as low as 6,000. And so, we'd look at that population and say, okay, it's town XYZ, it's got 20,000. We think that, it could work there as well. So, but it's one unit. So if you did decide to do an area development agreement, I spoke to Brandon about it yesterday, 2, 3, 4, 5 units, you get a specific area development agreement, and then there's a period of time that you get to develop each location. You have a choice. If you want to develop them simultaneously and you have the resources and cash to do it, that's fine with us. But we certainly want to have a particular market built within a certain time frame. Does that
One
help?
of the reasons we invested in GeoStrategies was we wanted to avoid some of the pit holes that emerging franchises fall into. Everyone's heard the horror stories of Subway and Dunkin' Donuts putting franchisees in a gas station across the street from, a brick and mortar store. So GeoStrategies is a living, breathing document that once you plant that flag, it creates that protected territory in real time, and it does it based on the demographics. And like Michael said, that 3 mile radius, regardless of, and pardon my assumption, your accent makes me think you're from New Jersey or New York. You can throw a rock and hit 50,000 people. Whereas, in some of the places I am, it takes you 10 miles to find 50,000 people. So we're going to protect that territory.
Well, no, and I have no, qualms about that. It's just, typically, I come from the restaurant industry. All right, Pizza Hut, most in particularly, and IHOP over the past 20 years. And typically when, a franchisee, they acquire a territory and they're given, X, 10 years, for example, to develop that territory to saturate that market. If not, then there would be, either extenuating circumstances like COVID or something that would lead to, the undevelopment of that market, or that you could be in, default of the franchisee agreement. So my thought process was, okay, if I'm going to purchase a franchise, but I only get, a 3 mile radius, then naturally, if I'm purchasing a 3 mile radius, then I want to be, centrally located, to the largest population. For example, the city I live in currently is Mooresville. Ideally, I'd like to purchase, the rights for that entire area to be able to develop it over the next 3 to 5 years. But if I purchase one, just to kind of get my feet in, my feet into it, see, how the model does, see how everything goes before, jumping into 3-4 of them. At that particular junction, another franchisee can open up, 3 miles away down the street. Does that make sense? So, I mean, that was kind of my, my basis for the question and concern.
Yeah. So you're going to want to do that call with Michael, because we have a franchisee, Craig Mundy he lives in Mooresville off the he lives on Lake Norman. I don't know what his territories are specifically. I know that he's looked in Kannapolis, but Michael, you'll have to have that call.
Yeah, I will. And Anthony, I think Michael Ciccarelli, I had some conversations with him and mentioned that Craig was in Mooresville, but there were territories to the left and to the right. So, and I'm hoping that he shared that with you.
No, but a little bit of a miscommunication there. My understanding Mooresville territory was open.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, and I believe it's in his agreement, Craig Mundy's agreement, right, Costa?
Yeah. I think he has Mooresville, and he bought 3 territories, and so he has 2 other territories. You're going to have to hop on GeoStrategies and confirm that, because Charlotte as a whole was able to do what, 21 territories total.
Yeah, we've sold what's it, 4, 5 plus 6, 11. We've sold 11
of them.
Yeah. Okay. And I'll send you a screenshot.
But
Anthony.
that being said, the first one that Michael Connor and his team did ended up being in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and ended up not being in the Charlotte area. So that might free up a territory as well.
Right. I did see that. I have restaurants currently in Rock Hill. I drove by it last week, matter of fact.
Okay, good. Brandon, any questions on your end?
Yeah, I got a question for Costa, since he's a finance guy. With the current, economic situation that's kind of unraveling here with inflation and interest rates rising, how's this going to affect the brand, financing, the development of the real estate and all that fun stuff? Do you have any idea?
Yeah. So, we are a business that is impacted by geopolitical events, because lubricants are made from crude oil. And so our prices have doubled since we started selling franchises. And so what we have going for us is, I largely believe that in the quick lube space, this is another macro view, that the quick lube consumer does not care about brands. So we're not paying that marketing cost. So when we have a 10% increase in product, 10% of $4 a gallon is a lot less than 10% of $10 a gallon. When you buy a Mobil 1, you're buying marketing, right? It costs a lot of money for them to sponsor Red Bull Racing. Same thing with Pennzoil and all those companies that at the end of the day are marketing companies. We don't mandate a lot of stuff in our program, but we do have systems set up, and we have private investors set up to fund the construction, because our model is largely based upon a lease improvement. And so when you don't own the land that the building is being put on, it's very difficult to go out to like a PNC or Wells Fargo and get traditional construction financing. And if you are able to get it, they typically want a large chunk up front. So we've partnered with a group of private investors that solely do triple net leasing, and they will finance the construction of the building. And whatever the cost is, it's plus 10% ends up being the lease price. So just to use round numbers, if the building costs $300,000 to put up, then you take 300,000, multiply it by 0.1, that's 30,000 divided by 12. That means your building rent's going to be $2,500 a month. And so that's the formula that we use, and what the private investors use for building these buildings. We've been looking a lot more into conversions, because it's low hanging fruit, and it just requires a certificate of occupancy and some improvements, rather than new construction, which depending on the town that you're in, can be held up right now because, we're dealing with new construction. Actually, Michael, Willem and Tamlin got their permit in hand yesterday morning. They physically went to the office to pick it up. But the office that handled zoning for construction also handles things from foreclosures to hunting licenses. And so when your office is backed up with all that administrative work, then you're dealing with the queuing of everything else that's going on in that town. And then some markets are much more sophisticated and require a lot more. We're building a building in Eaton, Colorado, and they're asking for, product safety sheets on the panels that our buildings are made out of, which are called SIPS panels, which stands for structurally insulated panels. And it can be a headache, but that's a long-winded way of saying that we're dealing with everything the same way that everyone else is dealing with things these days as best we can. But what I will say is, we've gone through so many quote unquote crises over the past 2 years. We had I don't know if you guys remember the lumber crisis when lumber prices spiked, and then we had an aluminum shortage, and then inflation and all these things. What I will say is, 30% of a $300,000 building is a lot less than a 30% increase on $1 million building. And when you have the same unit economics, when we have the same capability of doing the same top line revenue as a Jiffy Lube or a Valvoline, when that capability is there, then keeping your overhead as low as possible is beneficial and advantageous. And then the other thing is, because, I would say even more so than inflation, more so than price of cost of goods, labor, Anthony, I'm sure you can speak to this, being in the restaurant industry. I'm sure it's 10 times harder for you right now than it is for us, but labor right now has been the strongest headwind. But fortunately for us, being in the automotive space, at a very base level, our employees have an interest in the subject, so they're a little bit more sticky. I owned a pizzeria for a while, and line cooks will leave you for a 25-cent raise from the next guy, and it's very easy turnover there. So it's a breath of fresh air when we get these guys that we partner with, community colleges that have vocational schools, to hire someone that, maybe their long-term goal is not to be a quick lube manager, but in the interim, they're committed to the job, they show up, they have interest in vehicles, and it's one less headache that we have to deal with. The business does heavily revolve around a strong manager from a service standpoint. Having a strong manager and having continuity of the manager is important for eliminating that ramp up period. And so the ramp up period, since I've brought it up myself, might as well talk about it a little bit. And since I've used Chick-fil-A as an example already, I'll use it again. When Chick-fil-A has a grand opening, the people who eat there on that first day can eat there 4 more times that week, or even 6 times, but not 7. But in our space, every car that comes through our doors on that grand opening, that car doesn't come back for another 3 months or 3,000 or 5,000 miles. So automotive has this inherent ramp up period where no matter how good of a job you did, you have to wait for those customers to return to start seeing the exponential nature. Now, that's the downside of the automotive space, but the upside is it's a very sticky business. And so once you've acquired that customer, the retention rate is extremely high. It's a lot like, you find a barber that does your hair the way you like it. You keep going back to that guy until they give you a reason not to. And so the same thing with your oil change. So we need to execute on 3 things in order to get new customers. We have to execute on appearance, we have to execute on price, and we have to execute on service. And so appearance, environment, meaning, do we have a nice looking facility? Do our guys look approachable? Is the place clean? Price, obviously there's a segment of the population that do all of their commerce based on price. We do have couponing, Groupon, all of those things that business owners hate, but are necessary for customer acquisition. And then experience. And I do believe we have a superior model. I think that's the biggest upside and our biggest moat is that we don't have commissions. We don't have kind of the tactics that our industry got a bad reputation for, that created credibility issues. We're not, sticking our finger in the power steering fluid and holding it up to grandma's face and saying, oh, this looks terrible. And she's like, yeah, sure. I don't know if that looks terrible or not. And so that also ties into our continuity of labor. When our guys come over from a Take 5 or a Jiffy Lube and they don't feel like someone's looking over their shoulder, or they don't feel like they have to do unethical behaviors in order to make a bonus, that's a relaxing thing for them. And Michael, you can have them talk with, Daryl or any of the guys that, about the experience working for us versus working for some of the other brands. But, just by not having guys be a revolving door, that saves more money than you would make by getting a $3 margin on an air filter or an additive. So I think that's important.
Yeah.
This is unexpected. Michael Brandon's joining us.
Oh. Brandon is Costa's right hand man, and he's based out of Hanover. Hi Brandon, welcome. We've got Anthony from North Carolina.
Good morning.
Hi. And Brandon Grell is from Phoenix, Arizona.
Awesome. Two great places.
Yeah, Brandon's actually just been to Phoenix. He was instrumental in helping our franchisees open up Ryan and Andrea, who purchased 2 units. They're in the Mesa area. So
Yep. I'm from North Carolina originally, so.
Yep.
Enjoy the heat.
No, I did not like the heat.
Most people don't.
Well, Brandon, I think you were there in May, weren't you? It was still about 85 degrees.
April,
that's nothing.
it hit 102, I think, the weekend that I was there, but yeah.
Yeah, you gotta love the Arizona desert weather.
Yeah.
The monsoons are fun. Other than that, it's a little overwhelming.
Got to have air conditioners that work. Yeah. Yeah.
That's right.
Any more questions?
Well, I was more of a request than a question. I was going over the FDD. What I'd like to do is, I don't know if it's at all possible, but I'd like to be able to look at a P&L for, 2021 for a single bay and then multi-bay or a dual bay unit, just to get some accurate figures from a cost standpoint. I know the FDD incorporates a lot of, units in there. Some are full year, some are half year, some are 2 months or whatever, which kind of skews the numbers a little bit. But I'd like to be able to look at a couple of P&Ls if that's at all possible.
Yeah.
I will defer to Michael on that, but I know that, the FTC regulates the financial representations more than anything else. And so what we've done typically have been giving industry studies as opposed to actual P&Ls, because we cannot talk about anything that's not on the item 19, or we can't share anything that's not on item 19. And we also, as a corporate structure, don't run an individual store P&L. So until we have more franchises open for next year's FDD to have individual store financials, we don't, because a lot of my stores, and I'm sure you do this in your business, a lot of my stores are close proximity. We trade employees quite a bit. We trade inventory quite a bit. Things move back and forth. We also have this, my picture right now on the video is our private label products. We do a lot of self-distributing. And so running an individual P&L is not something that we're probably going to have until we have an internal controller, which will be probably relatively soon, but not for the 2021 FDD. And I'm definitely afraid of the federal government, and I think they've been flexing their muscles this last couple of years, and so I'm going to toe the line.
Okay, fair enough.
But Michael has ways of getting you information. I will say that.
Oh, and that's fine. I was just, doing some figures, based upon, some of the numbers, most in particularly, the labor numbers. And, I couldn't get them to really, make logistical sense.
Yeah, we
one-
can. Yeah, go ahead, Michael. We can have
No,
that
I was
conversation.
I was gonna say, Anthony, one thing, it'll take a little bit of time. I mean, I looked at businesses 10 years ago. I was in the trampoline business early on. One of the things that I did was, and you're lucky because you're right there. A lot of markets, we can't do this right now. And Costa's absolutely right. The Federal Trade Commission, especially with us having recordings here too, we can't divulge information that's not in the item 19 in the current FDD. And so we're hopeful next year we'll have the ability to do that with the locations that are opening up. But anyway, getting back to what I did was, I would make a number of trips to this trampoline center. It was Sky something or whatever. And I would go on a weekend, I would sit outside in the parking lot and just count the people going in. And, that can be something that could be real helpful for you without those numbers right now is, it's a pretty easy thing to do. You could check the numbers that are going in. That'll give you, it give you a pretty good idea of how that business is doing. And a single kiosk, capacity wise, 8-hour day, you can do about 45 cars, generally speaking, some imports, as
I was just trying to figure out the average, and I think, I was doing, I'm not half bad with math. It looked like the average, the Costa, oil change, is doing, on average, based upon what I can configure here, is we're doing roughly about 24 of them a day. And then I was, comparing and dividing the labor percentage amongst the dollar amounts, and, trying to come up with an accurate figure, per location. And that became very difficult to do relatively quickly.
It is, yeah, that would be difficult because we opened new locations, and also we had one location close halfway through the year because the landlord sold the building, and we were on a month-to-month lease, which is if anyone's had to go through that before, it's hard.
It's unfortunate, and the pain in the petunias, but unfortunately it happens.
Yeah. And so, yeah,
So that's all I was trying to do. Is I was just trying to itemize, line by line, just overall compare and contrast.
Yeah, we can get you there. Our single, I actually used to have a much lower ceiling on the single bay model because there is this delta where you can have too many customers, where the customer service starts dropping off because the line gets too long. If either of you have ever seen Dutch Brothers Coffee, they're going through that right now, where their queuing is so bad that it's actually affecting the quality of the service. But we've successfully done 38 cars out of a single bay without compromising customer experience. And so I've raised the ceiling as far as top line revenue goes. Of course, all other variables equal, we want a 2-bay. The reason we even talk about the single bay is it opens up opportunities and spaces that the quick lube business has never gone. So we're seeing a lot of businesses create kiosks versions of themselves. Taco Bell just launched a drive-through only version. Panera Bread is starting to do a kiosk version. And then if you go out to the Texas area, you have all of those, Church's Chicken and ice.
Most businesses that are operating in the quick serve industry are moving towards more of a consolidated,
less employee
footprint, less employees, more streamlined efficiency, stuff to that degree. And a single bay, makes sense in a lot of these smaller towns like Lincolnton or Lenore or Newton, some of the smaller population type towns.
And we when I first started going through this process, I really did want to target secondary markets because we've had a lot of success in secondary markets. And then when you start franchising, obviously you kind of lose a little bit of control over where the lead flow comes from. So we're in some incredibly large markets. Mesa, Arizona is easily the largest market, and it was our first franchise. So you couldn't have been a polar opposite of, Cleveland suburb. And so we've found ways to make it work, because at the end of the day, you know, the core view of it was Jiffy Lube's putting up these buildings for $1 million. They're selling it to a triple net investor for $2.5 million. The net operating income's got to be over 6 figures in order for the investor to make any money. Well, that puts a huge strain on the operator to do a lot of oil changes. Well, what's the first thing they did when they stopped being able to do all those oil changes? They started adding all these other services that customers didn't want. And then all of a sudden your labor costs go up because you have to have higher qualified employees in order to do these extra services. Whereas I think that the direction that the consumer wanted the whole way was less high pressure upselling, faster oil changes, less queuing, right? So if I do a $300,000 building, if I only have 2 employees working instead of 10, you know, that was the other thing. You know, we'd go buy these quick lubes that have 10 guys and 2 guys are actually doing the work and 8 guys are standing around. Well, you know, why not just have 2 guys to start to begin with, right? And so that's
streamline the endeavor.
And so we eliminated the amount of SKUs so that the manager has less to worry about in terms of inventory and actually, you know, so we've just really brought it down to a very base level, which has allowed for that lower labor costs, lower lease overhead, which then translated to a lower ramp up period. Valvoline Instant Oil Change is the only publicly traded quick lube in the country at the moment. Although Driven Brands did go public and Take 5 is a part of their portfolio, but you won't see them talk about Take 5 too much on their earnings calls. But Valvoline has said in a public call to Goldman Sachs that they think their franchisee ramp-up period is 4 years. And we estimate our ramp-up period to be 9 to 12 months. And it really just has to do with that capital outlay to get open. We're able to get open quicker, and the sooner you get open, the sooner you can start taking cars, the faster you can recoup those costs and start making money. And then ultimately, we believe we have the superior service, which means that the car count naturally will increase once those intervals start overlapping.
All righty. Perfect.
Have you guys ever had any issues with people driving through and causing problems, like running into something or some sort of weird issue with the drive-through model or anything like that?
No, we had in 2018 a young girl in a Toyota Yaris drove into the pit. And it was such a light car that 3 of us were able to literally lift it and bring it back onto the floor. But there's definitely a compilation of videos on YouTube of guys hitting the gas instead of the brake. So when our employees are guiding them in, they guide them in from the side. If the temperature is above 45 degrees, both doors should be open anyway. So we do, you know, hundreds of thousands of oil changes, and that was the one incident. So most people stop, we greet them. That's part of our process. We have a flow chart. You know, we want them to stop. That way we can kind of control the situation from the very beginning. So it has not been an issue. Knock on wood.
Yeah. Just kind of curious how come no one's ever done that model before. It's always get out of your car, have someone else pull it in. Is it an insurance issue that you had to work around, or?
No, I mean, there's been other players in our space that are stay in your car model, most notably Take 5. And in fact, when we had COVID in 2020, in April of 2020, since we were already a stay in your car model, everyone in our space closed their waiting rooms down and moved to a stay in your car model. We didn't have to change anything because we were already there. And so the Jiffy Lubes, the Valvolines that are used to ushering people into a waiting room that doesn't have a window, you know, kind of they had to change their model, whereas we were already in a position to do, you know, and then what we found was people preferred that.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
Can't think of anything.
Costa,
Anything else at this time? Shit.
yeah, Costa, just if you have a couple more minutes, one thing that you mentioned that was interesting is when you started the business, you looked at Jiffy Lube and that multi-care offering that they have. I know that you looked at a lot of reviews and you sort of reverse engineered this whole thing. But I think one interesting fact that you mentioned was if you look at the number of locations Jiffy Lube had, 10 years ago versus today, how that model still stands, 7 years later. And I think even as you talked a little bit about electric vehicles, and we can go into that in a lot of detail at a micro level in terms of the challenges that they face with that technology and supporting it. There's this mass of consumers that are moving to a more niche type of service. I don't know if you want to talk a little more about that, but I think it is interesting, and I get questions about it quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things to unpack there because Jiffy Lube, which was bought by Pennzoil, Jiffy Lube was a independently publicly traded company up until 1986, and then Pennzoil bought enough shares to get a controlling stake, and then eventually outright owned Jiffy Lube and took them under their umbrella. And then Shell bought Pennzoil in 2008. And then the first thing that Shell did was get rid of corporate-owned Jiffy Lubes. They just did not, Shell had a really bad experience with Shell Rapid Lube. There's not a lot of Shell Rapid Lubes left. There's some in North Carolina, ironically enough, but if you've ever seen one, Anthony, but Shell Rapid Lube was basically a failed experiment for them. And so what they did was they, in very large swaths, gave corporate Jiffy Lubes to their largest franchisees, which were mostly private equity groups. And so the first thing they did, and anyone who understands franchising will understand why they did this. The first thing they did was start moving towards trying to increase top line revenue. And obviously the logical reason for that is the only way Shell makes money off Jiffy Lube is through a royalty. And then of course selling of Pennzoil products, but a lot of the Jiffy Lubes don't even do that anymore because of the cost of oil. Long story short, a lot of these guys are on their second renewal. Jiffy Lube started franchising in 1979, 1980. And so it was a 20-year contract with a 20-year renewal. So around 2020, a lot of these legacy Jiffy Lube guys, they did not sign up for multi-care. If they wanted to be in the full service game, they would have, got a Meineke or a Midas. And so a lot of them are just exiting. And then a lot of them are exiting due to leases. So actually right in our backyard, Michael, I'm actually friends with the local operator, the local Jiffy Lube operator. He's a really good guy named Steve Lyons. He has 3 Jiffy Lubes, but he only has 2 now actually. In Carlisle, Pennsylvania, which is right outside of Dillsburg. Okay. His rent escalated to $10,000 a month.
His rent?
His rent. And so he had been there for 20 plus years, and landlord sold the building to a triple net investor, and he decided not to renew. And he just said, it's not worth it. A lot of these guys look at the quick lube space as a portfolio game where if one of their locations pop off, then it pays for the rest. And so they'll support kind of fledgling stores as long as they have a handful of stores that pay for the rest of the portfolio. And that made a lot more sense in the 90s and early 2000s when the oil change interval was only 2,000 miles. And, there was really only there was only 530 and 1030. Now you have 020, 530, 520, 016. There's a lot more to it than before. And so I think a lot of these old Jiffy Lube guys are just, disenfranchised. That's probably where the term disenfranchised comes from because they literally are getting out of their franchises. And so Jiffy Lube at its peak had over 3,000 locations. And as of the last National Oil and Lube magazine study, they're under 2,000 locations. So they're closing at a pretty rapid pace.
Is Costa Oil looking at any future services? What prevents, you know, Costa from going, you know, down the same path as, you know, Jiffy Lube in the future, you know, adding new services or whatever the case may be. I mean, you're operating out of a very, you know, streamlined space. So I
Yeah,
just,
it'd be really difficult.
you know, franchises, you know, do
Yeah.
that. You know, they expand their menu or services, and then they have to pull back and, you know, reevaluate.
Yeah, no, that's such a great point. You know, our building alone wouldn't really even allow for additional services to be done. But I mean, at the
thought process.
at the end of the day, like you know, I own the vast majority of the franchise entity, and so I very much get to instill my will into the company, and it's served really well so far. And so I would not bring on board members or shareholders who do not share the macro view that the oil change consumer wants an oil change only experience. And so to your point, Anthony, I'm going to see if I can share my screen for a second. You can actually see, I've been in so many Jiffy Lubes at this point, vacant or otherwise. I could tell you the year that the building was built based on the architectural work of it. But you know, these new Jiffy Lubes are, I found a good one. Let me share screen.
I mean, you know, I'm the guy that, you know, had my fill of, you know, Jiffy Lubes and stuff years ago, and went to change my own oil and have ever since.
Yeah, it'll make you do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, the last straw was, you know, they forgot to put the drain pin back in, and, you know, the oil pan, and I took off down the road, and I had a supercharged, you know, Mustang GT, and you can imagine when that happened about 5 miles down the road, right?
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, they had an issue with that.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Is the picture loading for this 2022 construction Jiffy Lube?
Yeah, it looks like it's popping up there. There it goes.
Okay,
Yep.
so this is their new building. This is the model that they've kind of been running with, and it's so obscene to me, because if you look at their legacy building, you know, here is a legacy Jiffy Lube in Georgia, that even this to me, you know, serves more than what's necessary. So what happened, you know, these places are not putting out the kind of money that, say, a McDonald's does, that allows you to force the franchisee to do a remodel every 15 years. So like a building like this, which is a perfectly beautiful building, you know, this former Jiffy Lube, they're not interested in this 2-bay anymore, because they're not really able to do the things out of it that they can do in this thing. And so that's the direction they want to go. So look at this NOI, you know, $163,000.
Where is that, Costa? Is that the lead? Oh, that's
Well, this is, I mean, this is not the best example because it's California, and everything in California is overly expensive. But you know, that's $14,000 a month, and that's not including the taxes.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's a lot of downward pressure on the operator. If you look at some of the, like, this is a Jiffy Lube from the 80s. I can tell just by looking at the model building and the awning that it has above the waiting room. You know, this right here, another 1985. I mean, nailed it. See, that's a reasonable, to me, that's a reasonable rent where you can do oil changes, but they already forced them into the multi-care. You can see they're in the multi-care. They got the brakes, you know, and so these Jiffy Lube operators, these Jiffy Lube franchisees, they're forced into this position where, you know, they're trying to sell this building for $1.3 million, and the investor is going to get $65,000 a year. That's not a good trade-off. These operators have to choose two things. Either they're going to increase their labor cost because they're going to have to hire someone who's actually capable of doing brakes and tires without having to lose sleep at night, or they roll the dice with some guy who doesn't have qualifications and then they risk the liability of the job not being done. And then it's a no-win situation for some of these guys, because it's harder and harder to find qualified guys. You're not going to find a mechanic that wants to work at Jiffy Lube. They've kind of shot themselves in the foot in terms of, you know, their standing on top and the credibility issues they created. They would have been much better off just trying to keep a healthy margin instead of, but you know, for all the reasons I outlined earlier, it is what it is, and they are where they are, and it's created an opportunity for us, in my opinion. So,
yeah.
yeah.
And Costa, you're not gonna, none of us here are gonna stand in line there and wait for an oil change. You know, when we're working, we drop in and they're doing a radiator flush and, you know, rotating wheels and so on, and it takes an hour. You're going to be sitting there for an hour.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of goes back to my original kind of thesis, is that if we double and triple down on selling people their time back, then ultimately, you know, we're going to have a winning product and service, because people care more about their time today than probably ever before in history. You know, if we didn't think that fast food could get faster, now with mobile ordering, you know, you show up and the food gets thrown through your window and you're off. You know, who would have thought that it would become more efficient than saying, give me a number two? So I think people more so than ever care about reducing that friction. And I think we've kind of achieved that. So,
yeah. So once, I mean, you know, in order for Jiffy Lube to survive, you know, based upon the information that you're given, what prevents them from, I mean, I've seen a lot of the 20-minute oil changes, 15-minute oil changes, take 5. You're seeing, you know, you're starting to see that pop back up a little bit more in the heavy metropolitan areas, not so much in the, you know, the smaller towns. But what prevents, you know, Jiffy Lube from taking a step back and, you know, streamlining their model to compete with, you know, Costa, you know, from that aspect? I mean, you know, it'd be other than the fact that they have commitments to a lot of these buildings, but, you know, take Pizza Hut, for example. Pizza Hut started off, their main traction was, you know, their pan pizza, their hand tossed, the thin crust, the dining experience. Now Pizza Hut's gone the streamlined way, where they're only opening up Delcos for, you know, delivery and carry out only. And, you know, they've shrunk the model down by 75% to make it, you know, more efficient.
yeah, I mean, the direct answer is there's nothing stopping them except themselves. I know people high up in Jiffy Lube that have heard me talk about this. I know, you know, the Quick Lube community is a small community, and they're aware of the perception. And so I did a video on YouTube. It's still up. I did it way before I started franchising. It was called Why I Think Jiffy Lube Multi-Care is a Bad Idea. It was like right after they launched Multi-Care. I referred to it as death by 1,000 cuts. I think they had 2,500 locations at the time I did the video, and now they're under 2,000. And I know people within Shell's organization that have seen that video, because I go to these conferences and I know people in the industry, and these things get shared. And it went a little viral within the Quick Lube community. And they just replaced their president of Jiffy Lube for the 3rd time in, I think, 5 years, and they're just tripling down on Multi-Care. I think there's nothing stopping them from doing a Jiffy Lube Express version of Jiffy Lube. And I think that good organizations recognize when they have to do those things, and then they do what Pizza Hut did, or they do what Little Caesars was probably one of the best reemergence of a brand that kind of was gone for a while. And
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think they have the resources. They're backed by Shell. You know, there's nothing stopping them but themselves.
Yeah, but they're gonna piss off a lot, part of my language, but they're gonna piss off a lot of franchisees. They go that route too.
Yeah, well, there's that part of it as well. You know, it's very expensive to get into a Jiffy Lube these days because of these buildings costing as much as they cost to put up. If you look at some of these newer ones, they recently opened one. This is down the street from our Harrisburg location. These guys, I'm going off on a tangent because I saw this. These guys were doing 60 cars a day when I first moved into Harrisburg, and they only do 30 cars a day now. And we obliterated these guys. And so I think I got to imagine that, you know, they're using the real estate side as a financing mechanism at this point, because to sell this building for $3 million, like that's crazy to me.
Yeah. They're still on location more than anything else, being right off the main interstate there, it looks like.
I mean, look at this building. Like, what was it necessary to have this waiting room look like this? I could talk about this all day, and I know you guys have things to do today, but
No, I'm right
this,
there with you. Question, with, you know, the emergence of the mobile mechanic, you know, starting to, you know, become a little bit more prevalent. Has, you know, Costa thought about, you know, maybe doing a mobile oil change? I mean, something to take it on site.
No, mobile oil changes have actually been around longer than the quick lube space, and the logistics of it make it very unprofitable unless you're the owner operator. There are some brands trying to franchise that right now, but it's, you know, it's a fool's errand unless you can. Where I have seen mobile oil changes work is when they land an apartment building or an office building where they can do, you know, 15 cars on site. There's storage problems. There's also the never expanding SKUs problem. A lot of the newer cars require canister filters. And so, you know, I guess if you're able to get a sheet of what cars are due to be serviced the day before from the front desk at the apartment building, you can kind of, you know, prepare for that. But, you know, it would be really difficult, and no one at scale has ever made it work. So, I don't think it's a feasible model in our space. Brakes and tires, you know, Mavis just launched a mobile.
Yeah, I was familiar. That's I was doing a little research and I came across that, and you know, I was looking at some statistics of mobile mechanics and mobile car detailing and stuff like that, and you know, it's becoming more and more. I don't know, it's gaining a little bit more traction than it has over the past couple of decades.
Yeah, I don't think it's feasible for oil changes.
I have a question about that comment about rent going up to like 10 grand. Is there anything that Costa does to keep that from happening?
Yeah, our agreement with the private investors is, I guess Brandon hopped off the call. I want to say it's a 1.5% annual bump.
Yep, Brandon had to pop. Yeah, to pop off.
So if you go through the private investors, and again, it's not mandatory to use our construction team or the private investors. It's just the lowest cost of entry to do it that way. You know,
and then is there a way to like buy it out so you end up owning it at the end of the day, or?
Yeah, so our current agreement with them allows the franchisees to buy it at any time within the first 2 years. And then after that, the investors can put it out on the market to sell it as a triple net lease. But it's a 15-year lease, so you're protected no matter who buys the lease. It's just the way of the investor to recycle their money.
Okay. And then last question for me is, can you talk a little bit about that electric revolution? I have my own ideas. I just want to hear from your perspective.
Yeah, so, you know, electric vehicles are becoming more and more prevalent. Obviously, we're you know, football season just started, and half of the ads have been, you know, Buick, GM, and everybody introducing their electric vehicles. You know, the statistics that are important to me right now are different than what they were when we first started this thing, because things do change quickly. But let's start with some base numbers. There's 340 million internal combustion vehicles registered in the US. Even if half of those go away, there are industries that are built upon consumer bases that are smaller than 170 million vehicles. But let's put that aside for right now. 4% of cars on the road are electric vehicles. The most recent studies show that even if 14% of cars were electric, our grid would have a Houston-like energy crisis on a weekly basis. You know, the whole point of Build Back Better was for infrastructure work to be able to create these things. But if, you know, and I hate to get political, but it's so politically entwined. If the Democrats refuse to get on board with nuclear energy, it doesn't matter, because there's not going to be the capability of charging these vehicles, because people are mistaken. They think that like people are going to charge the vehicles the way that people get gas. That's not true. People are going to charge the vehicles the way they charge their phone. They plug it in overnight. If everybody's plugged in overnight, it's going to put enormous strain on the grid. And so there's huge infrastructure barriers that need to be addressed. The other thing is people need to wrap their heads around the fact that they're going to have to get a new battery every 15 years, or sometimes even shorter. And it's basically like buying a new car.
But you know, not to interrupt you, I apologize, but I mean, you know, I've talked to a lot of people that have electric cars, and you know, I'm gonna be honest, I'm a little of a car guy myself. You know, I get bored easily. I mean, the average person having let's just say, you know, instead of 15-year battery replacement, they got to replace them every 10. Okay, and just go with the, you know, just for the sake of argument here, most people don't own a car longer than 3 to 5, you know, 2 to, you know, I think is it 2 to 5 years, 3 to 5 years is the average lifespan of a vehicle.
So I'm going to push back on that a little bit, only because there's some pretty alarming statistics out there that, one, the average car on the road. Well, so first of all, we don't care who owns the car. So this statistic doesn't really reflect.
My point was just people aren't worried about replacing the battery because they're thinking, okay, I'm going to trade it in or sell it before I ever got to replace this battery.
Yes. So I'll cycle back to that in a second. The average car on the road just exceeded the highest age it's ever been. The average car on the road is now over 12 years old. But here's an even more alarming statistic. The average car loan is now exceeding 72 months. And so it used to be you go get a car and the longest they would amortize it is 5 years. And that used to be a long time. Now that's the standard where you start, and people are being offered 84-month loans.
Yeah.
And when you have people in our country with as much credit card debt as we have, with as much car payment on a depreciating asset, and you're underwater, then the maintenance of that vehicle now has a very long window, right? Because you're going to be stuck in that car and it's only growing. And so for us, that's helpful to us. It's not great for the consumer. But the majority of people are underwater on their cars, especially when interest rates are about to do what they're doing right now. And you're not going to be able to refinance your way out of this situation and trade in every 3 years or 4 years. But let me cycle back to the battery thing. Battery capabilities will get better. I believe in American entrepreneurship. I believe in technology. And I think that we have the best and the brightest people in this country, and that it'll eventually be resolved. But at the moment, we don't have the mineral capability of servicing these batteries as well. There's just a lot of headwinds that need to be addressed. And, you know, if Congress is most likely going to flip in November, which means that nothing's going to get done, and, you know, I remember the omnibus package from President Obama where like all the bridges and tunnels were going to be fixed. And, you know, today we're still talking about fixing those same bridges and tunnels. And so what happened to that money? So it's a, you know, I don't have faith I have faith in entrepreneurs and business people. I don't have faith in the government to get done what needs to be done. So I think what's going to have to happen for electric vehicles to penetrate in a more meaningful way is going to be the advancement of battery capability and the reduction of charge necessity. Because like I said, if everybody's charging their car overnight, it's such low hanging fruit, guys, but everybody saw what California did a couple weeks ago with asking people not to charge their vehicles because they didn't want.
That was nuts. That was hilarious.
So, I mean, that's where we're at right now.
Well, I was talking to Michael. I mean, I would agree with you. I think the technology is probably every bit of 10 years away before, you know, the grids and everything else. I mean, hell, winter knocked out, you know, half the United States, and they couldn't even, you know, keep people warm in their homes. because they were trying to go so green so quickly with windmills and solar and everything else. I mean, it ran rampant through Texas, where I'm originally from. I mean, and they got one of the, the best power grids probably out there, and they struggled throughout the last winter or the winter before. So, I mean, I think the technology, I think we're on the right path. I don't think it's there yet. I think over the next 10, 15 years, they'll make some big strides there. But I would agree with you. I don't think the government's going to do anything to expedite that process.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your info on that.
It's been very interesting, Costa. I know most of us don't spend this much time on these calls, so this has been a treat to get that, background info from you.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate it very much. You taking the time out.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys being on the call. It's always fun to go down these rabbit holes. So
Great.
A
Well,
break
we,
fluid on that. That's
we have
just,
some-
oh, sorry, the picture, you have brake fluid. And I know you mentioned that you're not gonna do multi-care. Is that just topping off kind of a thing?
Yeah.
It's not
Yep.
brake fluid.
yeah, so courtesy items that are part of the service that people just anticipate. There are ancillary products that we do. Our main KPIs are bay time, car count, and ticket average. So we'll do anything that doesn't add on to bay time. We have wiper blades, we have air filters, we even do batteries on consignment. But we're gonna, make that customer wait if we have oil changes that have to be done. But all of those things allow for, that added ticket average without compromising bay time.
Okay.
And so, from a branding perspective, we want to create credibility. And so our private label products are a lot, to do with branding more than anything. Plus we have economy of scale at this point. So some of our private label products actually are less expensive than getting them from some of the national retailers.
What customer incentives do you offer for, repeat business or, bundle packages, frequent, I don't know, Costa Oil rewards, or, so what incentive do you have to, do you guys offer currently for, to attract the repeat business instead of the, the passerby that, hey, listen, okay, I'm on my lunch break. Hey, let's get it done. And the next time, they're off to somewhere else.
So there's kind of two things embedded in that question you just asked, because one of them is fleet accounts, and fleet accounts are an important part of the business. Fleet accounts are the easiest way to eliminate the ramp up period, but also in the same vein as that, we do go to, we'll go to a State Farm agent and we'll say, hey, you can offer discounted oil changes to your members, for being a member of your agency. Or we'll go to the, we have an agreement with a Giant Eagle grocery store where employees of that Giant Eagle, we went to Staples and we have these little business cards printed out with the logo on it that says preferred employee discount. Just by being an employee of Giant Eagle, you get discounted oil changes. That incentivizes the manager at the Giant Eagle to go to the employees and say, hey, look at this great benefit we just landed for you. And then for us, obviously, it incentivizes them to use us, and it's something nominal, like 10 or 15% off or $10 off, or we make that deal individually with them. On an individual retail consumer standpoint, we do a loyalty program, and we do a paper loyalty program. And for being a very technology savvy company, a lot of people always balk when I tell them that we do a paper loyalty program. And it came from my own experience with the Annie Ann's in the malls, where like I would always lose the card and I would never actually achieve that free pretzel because I would continually lose the card. And I keep going back because the product and the service was good, but I'd never achieve that 10th pretzel. And so, when you use a technology driven loyalty program through the point of sale system, like that never goes away. So it eventually comes up, and it could be 5 years later that they eventually get to their 5th oil change or whatever. And so I actually like the paper loyalty program because it does. And the other thing is, when you do a digital loyalty program, it doesn't get passed off to other consumers. What we see a lot of when we give our paper loyalty card out to a customer and it's say the 5th one is 50% off or the 5th one is free or whatever we set up for that local region, that person will then give the card to their uncle, they'll give it to their brother, they'll give it to their sister so that they can get it back so that they can get that free one next. And so all of a sudden we got 4 new customers that otherwise may have not come to us because of that loyalty program, that if you did a digital based one on your cell phone number, like you can't really pass that around. Or if it's based on the last 4 digits of the card you use, which is how a lot of these loyalty programs work. So yeah, we are archaic in that form, but everything else, we're a very forward thinking, technology driven company.
I imagine you guys have the app and everything for setting appointments and yada, yada, yada.
Well, we don't have appointments. It's first come, first serve. That's an important part of our model. We're working on a proprietary point of sale software. We have an app that's a game that's on iOS. It's in the Apple store that people can play while they're waiting in their car. And if they achieve a certain score on the game, then they get a discount. We're working on an application that will allow us to get more data. We already get a lot of data just from the VIN number, but there's a lot more data to be gotten that we could use to target. We tried with Waze at one point to do, but the iOS 14 update kind of blew up any chance of really tracking people's miles because now everyone opts out. And so before, a really viable model would have been to have Waze tracking your data in the background. And then when you get to 3,000 miles, do a push notification that says, hey, Costa Oil's 5 minutes away, you need an oil change. But that's kind of gone now because of the privacy updates from Apple. But we're looking to see how we can capture some of that stuff. And then there's always, time-based, we have an extensive email list and you can send out 3-month emails.
Well, yeah, email blasts have been going on for a while. My question is, it was my understanding when I was talking to Michael is that it's a 10-minute guarantee. And I understand that you're going to have your natural, popular, oil filters and stuff like that in stock. But what about the guy that's driving?
Yeah, Michael, I don't know where you got that from. We definitely don't guarantee 10 minutes.
No, no, Anthony, I don't know that. I apologize, but I don't know that I've ever said that. You can't guarantee 10 minutes.
Right. So and for the 10 minute, I think what I asked you was the 10-minute guarantee was based upon appointment only. And you said yes. So that's the reason I asked how the appointments were being set up. So I apologize. And technology is great, but I talk fast and my accent makes it difficult. So I may have miscommunicated it, but that was the understanding that I took away from it. So that was the nature of the question.
No, and for the most part, people who drive BMWs, people who drive Audis, who have extra components that need to be removed, the skid plates, the more difficult filter placement, those people are normally reasonable people and they understand that their vehicle is special and requires extra time. But the vast majority of cars, you have a drain plug, you have an oil filter, it comes off, it comes on, and filter goes on and off.
Pre-cutouts on the bottom of the scrape guard, yada yada yada.
And so it's a fairly painless product. Every once in a while, you'll get a jokester that says, "Oh, if it's not 10 minutes, it's free, right?" And you're like, yeah, but besides that, most people are reasonable. It was important for me to have 10-minute oil change in the name because it quantifies the service. And since the message we're trying to get across is selling people their time back, that was important to me. And it was also popular back in the 80s when Pennzoil 10-minute oil change was the thing, and Valvoline 15-minute oil change, and all the brands. Castrol used to be a 10-minute oil change. And then they kind of were like, we don't feel comfortable with it. But for me, I feel so strongly about the oil change only model. I have no problem, putting that quantification in the name of the business because it's important to me.
Yeah, no, that's great. I just misunderstood, I guess I misunderstood the answer. So I naturally assumed, because I've seen a lot of these, 10-minute, 15-minute, we guarantee you in and out 15 minutes with appointment or whatever. I've seen that on a couple of different oil change places, most particularly in the past. And I didn't know if this was a model similar to that or. So I was just gaining a better understanding. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, the great thing is, Anthony, we can do cars faster than 10 minutes, but we will never guarantee it. But domestic cars, I mean, you got two good guys like you have in a lot of the locations. I know Daryl and his partner Mark, yeah, they do cars 6-7 minutes. Domestics, that's how well they work together. Of course, the imports and trucks take longer, right? With the canister filters, and you got to put in 7-8 quarts. Yeah.
Yeah, no, streamlining the oil change. I mean, heck, I could do it in 20 minutes in my garage, and that includes topping off all the filters, changing the air filter, jacking the car up, and bringing the car back down and clean up.
Yeah, that's fast.
Yeah, having the facility designed to do it just creates those 10 seconds here, 30 seconds there. The tools are at your fingertips. What people don't realize, and a lot of people, there's a lot of old school mechanics that they'll leave their car draining overnight, and what they don't know is that actually doesn't matter, because the crankcase, there will be old oil that is stuck in crevices inside the crankcase and parts of the engine, and so it could literally sit there for 100 years. If it's in a pocket of the engine, it's not going anywhere.
Only way to do it is to flush it.
And so it's an immaterial amount of oil that gets evacuated on a 5-quart car after 4 minutes of draining. So we teach our guys, when you see a hairline, as soon as you see a hairline, get the plug back in, and then you can add the oil.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, I guess we've gone way over. This is the longest call we've ever had.
I apologize.
No, it's fine. I think we're very interesting topic. Well, Anthony, I'll be in touch with you. I sent you the map for Charlotte, and I know we have another call set up. And Brandon, I'll look forward to chatting with you. I think next week. So
yeah, Monday.
Great. And then just a quick heads up, just on Discovery Day, we did not do one this month. So October, it's the 19th and 20th, which is a Wednesday, Thursday, and for those of us that need to fly in, we generally will need to be in by 4:00 in BWI, and then Costa arranges transport for us out to our corporate office. We stay the night in a hotel, have dinner as a team, and then the next day we work from about 8:30 until 2:00. And so you can book a flight out on the Thursday anytime after about 4:30. 5:00 is good. So I just wanted to run through that. So hopefully, Costa, we'll all see you in October.
All right, I'll see you later. Thanks, guys.
Thank
Okay.
you so much.
All right, bye.